Today, today we live in a day and age where everyone feels like it's necessary to take artificial means to enhance their bodies. Getting completely away from the natural way that their body is supposed to be, right? Some people are prone to staying slim. Some people are prone to gaining a little bit more weight. And this is where understanding your body type and accepting your body type comes into play, because everyone is born a certain way. Everyone is born in the way that God made you. From your genes, from your family members, it was passed down to you. And it's only through social media, everything you see outside, external sources, that make people question whether they should take artificial means to enhance their body with implants, uh, muscle oil, anabolic steroids, and all these things are not the answer. Truly, first off, I want to say that all these artificial means they take away from your body's natural beauty, right? Because a lot of these things have side effects. If you were meant to have butt implants, you'd be born with them. If you were meant to have oil in your muscles, it'd be right there in your fruit. If you were supposed to have anabolic steroids, it'd be right there in an apple. Just think about that for a second. And as I said, we're all supposed to be born a certain way, so this is the reason why you need to understand your different body type. There's 3 different body types. Well, according to the mainstream of what's being put in front of us, there's 3 different types of body types. 1, Endomorph. 2, Ectomorph. And 3, Mesomorph. Now, to break down the 3 different types and to make it easy to understand your body type, Endomorph, think of N as you hold things in. So an endomorph is someone who is prone to putting on extra body fat. Their body is naturally a little bit thicker, or they may have a little bit body fat around their body in certain areas. It's just because of your genetics. So now, with this in mind, external variances can throw off your genetics and your hormones and everything based on the food that you put into it. So like I said, if you're more prone to gaining body fat, you may want to consider eating less food that have a whole bunch of fat if you're trying to lose fat. You see? So people who are endomorphs, because they hold things in, such as fat, for example, it is a little bit harder, more difficult for them to burn fat, for them to lose weight, for them to try to be able to attain this supermodel body type of physique, because that's already not natural anyway. Everyone's not supposed to be a twig, and everyone's not supposed to be huge. Everyone's not supposed to have a big old booty, and everyone's not supposed to have big bulging triceps and biceps. We're all a little bit different. You got to remember that. That's very important. Another thing is, if everyone could just focus on just eating natural, it wouldn't be so difficult to try to get your fitness goals, right? So endomorphs is really difficult for them to keep their body fat down, because a lot of the food that we eat is high in saturated fat, high in sodium, high in all this excess minerals, calories that you just don't need for the lifestyles that we live today, because it took us thousands of years to adapt to the body type that you have, right? Just keep that in mind. Next body type, ectomorph. So like excrete. Think of excrete. You push things out. It's easier for you to push things out, so you're not going to hold on to much fat. Ectomorphs have a hard time putting on fat. Ectomorphs have a hard time putting on muscle mass or getting big when they're trying to work out or get in shape or anything like that. So ectomorphs, it's good for you to keep in mind that you have to eat a lot more. Now, just because you have to eat a lot more doesn't mean that necessarily you should start eating a whole bunch of bad foods, processed foods, because like I said, with the endomorphs, that's one of the big issues. This is an issue for everyone. Endomorphs, ectomorphs, and mesomorphs. We all have to sustain or restrain from eating foods that are bad for us. That means food that are mostly unnatural or processed foods, because everyone can suffer from the negative consequences of eating bad food. So keep that in mind. All right. So ectomorphs, if you're trying to gain muscle mass or get bigger, you're going to want to eat foods that have a lot more calories, a lot more protein dense foods, and carbohydrates. Fat is good as well, but you want to stay away from excessive amounts of saturated fat. All right. So eat lots. You don't want to be doing plenty of cardio or anything. This is cardio, extreme cardio, like high intensity workouts. Those are more for the endomorphs, right? Because they hold things in, so they got to get it out. They got to get their body in fat burn mode. Versus if you're an ectomorph, you need to get your body in like hold on mode. You got to eat more, and you want to do workouts that give your body a good burn, as in like you get plenty of muscle activity, plenty of hard, heavy weights, and you don't want to be doing a whole bunch of cardio. So the high intense training, unless you're just trying to get your cardio up for your sake, you got to keep those things in mind. Next one, Mesomorph. Mesomorph is like an ectomorph and an endomorph combined. It's kind of easy for them to put on muscle mass, but at the same time, if they don't pay attention to it, they can put on some fat as well. And if they want to lose fat, it's not as hard for them to lose fat, as well as it's not too difficult for them to modify their body. You know, it's easy for them to lose weight, it's easy for them to gain weight. But at the same time, they still have to put in work. Still, mesomorphs still have to pay attention to the things they eat. My body type is mesomorph. So I can gain muscle and get in shape and everything, get strong, get bigger in natural means. But at the same time, if I don't pay attention to the foods I eat, if I start slacking, getting lazy, I can get like a little bit, my definition can go away as well. In my abs and other parts of my body, it can start changing. It can seem like as if I wasn't working out, or it's like some people see me years ago and then see me when a time where I'm not as cut, and they say, hey, what happened to you? I thought you was Mr. Six Pack. Hey, I'm prone to, or mesomorphs are prone to losing their physique as well. The thing is, with mesomorphs, it's not as difficult for them to gain weight, or it's not as difficult for them to lose weight if they're needing it, see? But here's the thing that everyone needs to consider. Mesomorphs, endomorphs, and ectomorphs. Everyone needs to pay attention to the type of food they're eating as far as the healthy types of food, and try to stay away from these super artificial foods, because it's the artificial foods, the super processed foods, the foods that are super high in saturated fat. Those type of foods are the reason why we have this certain health epidemic that we have these days, meaning like high blood pressure. Because I'm gonna say this right here. When you have inflammation, if you don't eat certain foods that reduce inflammation, it can lead to chronic inflammation. And if you don't eat foods that's going to reduce your inflammation, once you've gotten the chronic inflammation, it can escalate to diseases or cancer. You see what I'm saying? You want to keep those things in mind when you're eating your food or considering the types of food that you're eating, because just because you're a mesomorph and you don't get fat easily doesn't mean that you can't get clogged arteries. All right, this is where you don't judge a book by a cover, because just because they may have shoulders like a football player or a six pack like Bruce Lee doesn't mean that they're necessarily healthy, because you have to look at the food that they've been eating as well. So if you're someone who is you may have a six pack or whatever, but if you eat McDonald's every day, you're still at risk of having heart disease. You see what I'm saying? So you got to hold yourself accountable. Everyone needs to hold themselves accountable. Now, this brings me to my next point. Instead of trying to augment your body to try to meet up with the status quo, or to try to be like some guy you saw on Instagram, or try to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the 70s, everyone could benefit by accepting themselves for who they are, the way God made themselves. And instead of trying to focus on artificial means, just eat natural foods. If you eat natural foods, your body will be more towards its natural self. So someone who's an endomorph, who is more prone to gaining fat, you could avoid being obese, which is like the totally unnatural means of fat. That's an unnatural means of body fat. That's an unnatural body composition. That's because of excessive calories, excessive food, and nowhere near enough exercise or moving the body. That's where that comes from. So being anorexic would be the extreme for a ectomorph. So someone who's an ectomorph doesn't necessarily need to be going on some crazy strict diet where they're consuming 0 calories. Your body already has no problem excreting fat. So what you need to focus on is just eating more natural food. So then you make sure your body stays healthy. All right. When I say natural, it means like foods that are less processed. That's for everyone. Foods that are less processed. When you look at your food, look at the ingredients. All right. So try to get foods that have the least amount of ingredients is best. If you can get your food and just make it at home, that's a step up. Look at the sources of food that you're having. If you're eating most of your food that comes in a box, that's going to come predisposed with a whole high level of sodium. That means they're going to be using more than likely just regular white table salt. All right. So you want to be the benefit of making your food from home is when you get these foods like from the grocery store, say like your meat or your vegetables or whatever, when it comes to adding sodium, you can add the amount of salt that you want. So switch up your white table salt and get sea salt or pink Himalayan salt. There's a give and take to either one. I suggest you all do your research and choose the one that works best for you. But either way it goes, either one of those is going to be better than standard white salt. All right. So accept yourself for who you are and move from there. All right. So all the thick girls and thick guys, being thick is normal. I've seen some dudes that were thick that could outrun me. Okay. Because he was an ectomorph or an endomorph, excuse me. An endomorph doesn't necessarily, just because you're endomorph doesn't mean that you have the inability to get in shape. Or when I say in shape, I mean cardiovascular shape. Or just because you're endomorph doesn't mean that you can't do a whole bunch of push-ups too. Or just because you're ectomorph doesn't mean you can't be strong as well. 'Cause I've seen a dude who was skinnier than me, and I've seen plenty of other people who were like skinnier, like say people in Africa. I was in Ethiopia, and this guys was super skinny, and we're working out, and we're us Americans, we're big and everything, and we think we're strongest guys, but this really really skinny guy was able to come up, and we were hand tightening screws, and he just did him like no problem, made all of us look like punks. So it goes back to don't judge a book by its cover, because just because you're predisposed to gaining a little bit more fat, or just because you're predisposed to having difficult time to gain weight, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. All right. I hope that I sparked some sort of interest in you to do your own research and go a little lighter on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself, because everything could be worse. Think about that, right? And this brings me to my next point. Don't focus on losing weight. Focus on eating healthy. All right. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.